Michael Cohen turning up the heat and naming names about executives at the Trump Organization. Congress wants to follow up. Cohen name-checked Trump's money man, Allen Weisselberg, over 20 times in the testimony.
Allen Weisselberg, the chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, he directed us to go back to Mr. Weisselberg's office. The bottom signature, I believe, is Allen Weisselberg's. Allen Weisselberg made the decision. Always Allen Weisselberg on the check. Mr. Weisselberg, for sure. Allen Weisselberg, Allen Weisselberg, Allen Weisselberg, Allen Weisselberg.
There you have it. Weisselberg is the chief financial officer at Trump Org. He was even featured as, one time, a judge on The Apprentice. And Donald Trump has written that he did whatever was necessary to protect the bottom line. Trump's former campaign manager, also in the know, says Weisselberg tracks every dime that leaves the building. And the House Intelligence Committee plans to call Weisselberg to testify. We already know where this is headed. The head of the Oversight Committee says they'll also pursue additional Trump Org officials, including Trump's longtime assistant, Rona Graff, and his children who are involved in the business, Don Jr. and Ivanka Trump, and one-time bodyguard and now COO, Matthew Calamari, who has gone viral after Cohen's testimony with the resurfacing of and we have nothing against awkwardness, but a yes, awkward 2004 appearance on The Apprentice.
Another man who's done a great job for me is Matthew Calamari, my chief operating officer.
Donald, you know I don't care for Jen very much. Got to be honest with you. Because, well, I'm not doing too good.
People think this stuff is easy, right, Regis? It's not so easy.
It's not so easy. Barbara Ress is a former Trump Organization executive. She wrote the book, All Alone on the 68th Floor, and she hired Mr. Calamari. MSNBC News analyst Howard Feynman has been tracking these stories for some time. Good evening to both of you.
Hi there.
Barbara, I think you know the saying, it's getting hot in here.
Yes, it is. It's getting hot.
It's getting hot for people who've worked for Trump Org. Maybe not you.
No, I'm cool.
You're good. You're cool. Mr. Calamari, you hired him.
Matt, the big squid, we used to call him.
Was that an affectionate term?
It was then.
It was then?
Yeah.
Can anything be gleaned from that appearance? I don't like to give people a hard time. He wasn't used to talking on TV.
No, the only thing that can be gleaned is that he's the COO, and that's consistent with some of the appointments that Trump has been making.
Meaning?
Putting people in charge of things that maybe they're not necessarily qualified.
You're saying he was in over his depth?
Perhaps.
Was he a squid in rougher waters than he could navigate?
I don't know that they were rougher waters. They may have been more intellectual waters than he could navigate. I mean, you know, he was the bodyguard, Donald's bodyguard.
So he was like a squid in a water tank at a library, and he was not accustomed to that environment.
That could be, yes.
Okay.
I'm questioning what he actually did. I mean, he had a title, but I don't know what he actually did.
Isn't that, wait, you say Mr. Calamari had a title, but you didn't know what he did, and you worked at Trump Org. Isn't that a bad sign?
Well, when he worked for me, I knew what he did.
I understand, but
Yeah.
when he worked there?
Well, as COO, I don't know what he could possibly be doing as COO.
How many people like that were there hanging around Donald Trump with titles, fixing problems, but they didn't really have real jobs?
More and more as time went on. Initially, when I started, and there were 8 or 10 people in the organization, they all knew what they were doing, and they all belonged in their jobs.
Weisselberg, does he know how Trump used his money?
Yes. Weisselberg, I think, really did a lot of Trump's personal accounting, and he was the accountant for the company. I mean, when I met him, he had just come there. It was like 87. He worked in Brooklyn. And when I worked there earlier than that, you know, Brooklyn did all our accounting for us, paying bills, writing checks. And that's what he did. He paid bills. He wrote invoices. He collected money.
Will he spill the beans or do a lot of I don't remember?
You know, it's hard to do. I don't remember. I've been deposed many times, and after a while, you got a smart liar on the other side. That's not going to ring too true. I don't think Allen would perjure himself. I mean, I've been surprised at things that I've seen that people I knew have done, but I would be surprised if he would perjure himself.
Do you think that there are other hush money payments that he may know about?
Yes.
How
Just
many?
instinctively, lots.
More than 5?
Probably.
More than 10?
I can't say.
But that strikes you as
An instinct. Trump would do that kind of thing, and Allen would be the guy that would draw out the check. Probably Trump would sign it himself.
Yeah. Let me read to you from, you mentioned depositions. You've been your way around them. Here was a 2011 one we had in a Trump case with Weisselberg, and questioned, he was described as Mr. Trump's eyes and ears for his investments. And he answered, am I his eyes and ears from an economic standpoint? Yeah. So what do you think is the stuff that is most damaging that he would know?
Not stuff having to do with stocks. I think more dealing with, like as Mr. Cohen intimated, insurance claims and things like that, and payoffs, hush money, as they call it, payoffs.
Interesting. So, look, you know both those individuals we just discussed. Howard, I want to bring you in and play some of the other name-checking Michael Cohen did, because at the end of the day, whether he made mistakes or not, he knows these people. He's a lawyer. He knows exactly what he's doing. Take a look at the list of witnesses he made.
Don Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump. It would either be Eric Trump, Rona Graff is Mr. Trump's executive assistant, David Pecker, Dylan Howard, Barry Levine of AMI as well, Allen Weisselberg, Alan Garten of the Trump Organization as well.
Who else knows that the president did this?
Alan Weisselberg, Ron Lieberman, and Matthew Calamari.
Would Don Jr. or Mr. Weisselberg have more information about that?
Mr. Weisselberg, for sure.
Howard, how does the House deal with that?
Well, Ari, in the campaign, I spent some time on the 26th floor of Trump Tower in Donald Trump's office, talking to Donald and other people. And it reminded me nothing so much as a somewhat more upscale back room at the Bada Bing. It was Donald Trump sitting behind the desk and various people milling around, nobody sitting down because Donald Trump had too many trophies and paintings and other things on all the chairs and seats. There's nowhere to sit down. But everybody milling around the office, and only one person who mattered and who was making everybody else argue with each other and so on. That was Donald Trump. The larger point is here, and the big picture point, is that the American people and the investigators are going to have to decide whether Donald Trump, his family, and his inner circle, all of whom were described there by Michael Cohen, together constitute an ongoing criminal conspiracy that might have made itself either vulnerable or willing to conspire with the Russians. But even if it didn't do that, is this ongoing tax evading, hush money paying, corner cutting, ongoing criminal conspiracy that's interested in one thing, which is money for the family. I don't know what Jared Kushner may have done or said that got the CIA's interest. It could be foreign policy, or it could be money that might have left him open to blackmail. That's the big question here, and that's what connects all the different investigations in New York and Washington. Is this basically a giant RICO case? That's what we're dealing with.
Lightning round of all the names named, as a reporter and as a former Trump org exec, which do you think holds the most peril now after Cohen? Howard?
Well, obviously, Allen Weisselberg. I mean, I go back to the Watergate days when I came in the movie. It was follow the money.
Barbara?
It's still follow the money, because that's the ultimate motivation of this group of people.
Weisselberg, and I love the description of Donald's office. It was 100% spot on.
Spot on.
Oh, thank you.
Well, there you have an eyewitness and a former Trump org exec. It's fascinating to see this play out now on a national basis, but also in many ways disturbing for the reasons you both stated. Barbara and Howard, thanks to both of you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.